In a small city like Lynchburg, Virginia, there are several downtown staples that everyone knows: Monument Terrace, the Langley Fountain, the Tea Room, and of course, the Prophet of Lynchburg. For months I've driven by this man, curious about his message and his story.
Dude, are you sure this is a good idea?
It'll be fine. Hey, how you doing? I'm Todd. I started this project in hopes of finding an interesting story.
I was wondering when you were going to show up. I'm John.
You're expecting me?
Yeah, of course. God told me you were coming.
Can I take you out for lunch?
Sure.
But what I came away with was something more profound than I had expected. I explained to John my intention to do a documentary on him, and to my surprise, he was eager to participate.
God told me that you'd be coming to talk to me and help spread the word.
God told you? I mean, you think God speaks to you?
Of course. I'm not crazy, if that's what you're thinking.
Throughout our conversation, John is articulate, intelligent, and well-mannered. Not the stereotype one would expect from a homeless man foreboding the apocalypse.
For better or for worse, I've been chosen to deliver a message to people. And whether they choose to recognize that message, well, it's their choice to make.
And that message is that the end of the world is near?
The message is that if we don't change our ways as a society and as a species, then our extinction is near.
That's an awfully strong statement to make, don't you think?
No, it's an awfully strong message to deliver.
Prophet would be someone that God used as a mouthpiece.
For a better understanding of what makes someone a prophet, I sat down with two religious leaders of the Lynchburg community.
Prophets come from all kinds of places. Many of the prophets are presented to us in the scriptures as not really wanting the job.
They kind of fall into two major categories. One is criticizing worship of other gods, also social injustice.
To call the people usually back to a more pristine, less corrupt understanding of who they are.
But prophecy or contact with God or the other world was more understood and appreciated at a certain point in time than it is now. Now if somebody says they talk to God, people think they're crazy.
But even the psychiatrist I went to wasn't sure I was crazy.
So you did seek help then?
I guess you can call it that, but what it really was a misguided attempt at labeling what I was experiencing.
John's case was an interesting one in that his wasn't a clear-cut case of schizophrenia.
With John's written permission, we interviewed the psychiatrist he briefly met with upon first hearing the voice.
Auditory hallucinations are a well-documented symptom of schizophrenia. However, schizophrenia implies a broad disorganization of social functions. And in John's case, well, he was quite the opposite. John was an organized individual. He was coherent, socially aware, and fully functional in his surroundings.
God was telling me the truth. Every lie that society had embedded in me, God brought to light. And God was telling me that these possessions I had surrounded myself with, the lifestyle of want, the technological isolation I lived, they were all lies. I didn't need these pseudo-luxuries. They were just distractions from what life really is. By letting go of those material possessions, I had freed myself from their restraint. And in turn, my eyes had been opened to a world I had been blind to.
What world is that?
One of pure majestic joy. The world of God.
John showed me around the majestic city that he called home.
This is my favorite place to sleep.
Oh yeah, why's that?
Because you wake up in the morning and there's birds are singing, there's a gentle murmur of the river. It's a reminder to me of how simple and pure things can be.
What do you do when it gets cold out?
God leads me to warmth. I didn't always live like this, you know. I mean, only 3 years ago, I was what society deemed a normal, productive citizen. I had what they call a decent job. I was chipping away at the mortgage on a small house.
John came to a point in his life where he wanted to make different choices. He wanted a change of lifestyle. He understood the choices he was making and their consequences.
Why not go to a homeless shelter for a nice warm bed or a soup kitchen for a decent meal?
To do that would be feeding into the bowl of everything that is wrong with society. Those places scare people into thinking that if they don't obey the norm, they'll be deemed an incompetent or hobo or someone to be frowned upon or pitied. I don't want pity. I choose to live like this. It brings me a higher spiritual awareness. It brings me closer to God.
Humanity has become so self-absorbed in our infantile lives that we have forgotten who and what we really are.
And what exactly are we?
We are creatures of the same earth, the same communal spirit. We're all part of the greater love, which is God.
Yeah, here's a good find.
John, that can't be sanitary.
No, you'd be surprised. Most groceries and restaurants, they throw away produce right when it hits the labeled expiration date. But, I mean, you can tell by smelling and looking and touching whether produce is good or not, can't you? But, again, in our society, we have it so ingrained in our heads that we have to eat as much as we can and as fast as we can that when it hits that pseudo-expiration date, we just toss it out and go buy something new. Do you know in our country alone, we throw away more than 40% of our soil-grown products?
God tell you that?
No, I read that in the newspaper a while back.
If people see me as an outcast, it's because of societal stigmas and teachings. They've become blind to God and what God wants for us.
What about the voice he refers to as being God's?
You know, I can't really say. I didn't have enough time with John to fully diagnose and understand the conditions of his psyche. Therefore, it would be premature of me to make a conclusion one way or the other. But he wasn't a danger to himself or others, so there was no premise to enforce further sessions.
So what about the violence that you hear towards the homeless? Has that ever been an issue for you? Have you ever had any experience along those lines?
Well, I've had a run-in or two with some people who are just angry at the world, and sadly, they feel the need to take it out on strangers. But luckily, God has never led me down an alley that I couldn't walk out of.
A prophet is supposed to be critical. He's not supposed to tell you what makes you feel good.
Are they ever kind of warmly accepted? No, it's not in the nature of prophecy to be warmly accepted.
3 weeks after my lunch with John, I was contacted by the police and asked to come to the station to answer some questions in regards to a John Doe that had been found.
Was it him?
Yeah. John's body was found beaten to death earlier that morning. With no identification on his person, the only lead the police had was the business card that I had given him. I soon realized just how quickly the world had forgotten John. There was no mention of his death or the senseless crime that ended his life on the local news or in the local paper, not even an obituary. To most passers-by, John was probably just a crazy guy on the street corner, easily forgotten. Was John a prophet, or was he suffering from mental illness? I'll leave that for you to decide. But consider, those well-known prophets of past may have been the crazy guys standing on a street corner somewhere, sharing their message and story with anyone who would take the time to listen.
Death is just the beginning of eternity.